Am I audible now? Am I audible? Okay, please turn on your cameras, everyone. Hello Abhishek, how are you? Did you take the prelims this time? How was it? You got confused a little bit. Okay. What about other people? How many of us? Danish? Aman? How was the prelims? Shivanshu? Oh, you will be sitting in the next year. Okay. Shivanshu, क्या हुआ तेरा?
Good enough. Somewhere between 80 to 87.
Oh, so you should be preparing for mains now. Okay. Yeah, okay, cool. So let's start with the topic that was left post prelims, that deals with the topics that are not necessarily polity related, topics that are not necessarily, I mean, they cannot be really segregated into one traditional subject, correct? So the topics that you see on the screen, is the screen shared with everyone? No? Wait a second. Still not shared? Give me 1 second. Is the screen shared? Okay, all right. So let's now start. And so what I was saying is that so these are the subjects that are there on your screen, and development processes and development industries, the role of NGOs, SHG, various groups, associations, donors, charities, institutional and other stakeholders. Now, this is not really polity, this is not really traditionally social issues or society or social justice, so this can be. Then you have statutory, regulatory and various quasi-judicial bodies. Remember when we were covering polity in foundations, we did not cover these subjects simply because regulatory bodies operate on the overlap of politics and economics. So for example, if I ask you to recall some of the regulatory bodies, you would say, sir, RBI regulates the banking, and SEBI regulates the share market and various other stuff. So it regulates derivatives. Then you have insurance sector regulator IRDA, then you have pension fund regulator PFRDA, then you have PNGRB for the regulation of oil and market distribution, oil and gas distribution and marketing. Now, so that's why, I mean, they can be covered anywhere. They do not really require a good level understanding of polity or constitution. Then when you move on to the next topic, which is important aspects of governance, transparency and accountability, e-governance, applications, models, success, limitation and potential. So it basically expects you some of the knowledge and information about the job that you are preparing for. So it's like a component of public administration optional taken from there and inserted into the GS2 syllabus. So it's in that sense, these are the two lines of GS paper 2 which expects us good understanding about how the bureaucracy actually operates and how is it supposed to be operating in a democratic framework. Is this clear to everyone? And then finally, UPSC expects you to know about your role once you get selected. Probably a lot of us do not know. We just start preparing without realizing what is the role that we are expected to serve. And so that is why this was inserted in 2013, that first let's expect the aspirants to know about the job that they are expected to do. Is this making sense to everyone? Okay, all right. Hardik, Gauri, Shritama, Abhishek Sahu, please turn on your camera. You know the rule, right? Please turn on your cameras. All right. So today and tomorrow we will try to cover the development processes and development industries. And let's start by addressing what development industry and development process is all about. When you look at the word development, development is as subjective as number of people. You ask development to n number of people and you are going to get n number of examples as to what they think the development is. And so in that sense, development is highly subjective. It keeps on varying with the location, time, and it also keeps on varying as the society evolves. For instance, when you look at the word development itself, just look at the Indian context about the word development. One thing that no one can deny is that development as a word means that there is some change in the society, there is some change in the politics, and that change more often than not is positive. So if the change is negative in the society, you go to a particular place and you see that earlier there was a good infrastructure, and when you go to the same place 10 years down the line and you see the same infrastructure, for example, Aritra's hometown, Kolkata, you go there 10 years down the line and then you see exactly the same, except he will say, no sir, there is a new metro that has developed. So barring that exceptional metro which connects Howrah to Salt Lake, you will see that there is no development taking place in Bengal, in Kolkata. So what leads you to say that there is no development that is taking place? The fact that you go there 10 years down the line, you don't see any change in infrastructure. That is one of the parameters. Does not mean the society has not developed, but one of the aspects of development is economic development or economic growth that has not happened. So because the economic growth or economic development is the most easily quantifiable measure, you can measure economic growth most easily. Slowly, whenever you talk about development, the first thing that you're likely to think about development is economic growth. Initially was our measure or benchmark of development. Economic growth. That is why you will see so much of emphasis given, for example, in first and second and third 5-year plan just after the independence on planning, and planning heavily focused on large industries, because it was understood that if you are able to add value to the economy through the production of capital goods and other important goods through import substitution, you will create economic growth, and economic growth, it was understood, automatically transforms to other form of development. So the idea is essentially Marxist, that if you have money, you can buy anything. You can buy the class, you can buy the luxury, you can buy the privilege. It is the income which determines, or it is the capital that determines all other assets in life. But you can see that development itself was focused or hovered around economic growth. While we were focusing on economic growth, within 10 to 20 years, we itself modified this term with socio-economic growth. Now, look at any document, you don't find economic growth as long as it is just not about budget or economic survey. Rest all other government documents now increasingly started talking about socio-economic growth. That what the syllabus expects you to know, that development is a process. It is never static. It keeps on evolving with time. It's like DPSPs. You start with minimum and achieve as much as you can, and as soon as you achieve them, set the new goals for the society. So we understood the obvious limitations of targeting and focusing purely on economic growth, and if it is not combined by the concomitant socio growth, it will be of no use. And that is why towards 1980s and 90s, the government document shunned using this single term economic growth, and they started focusing on socio-economic growth or socio-economic development, a positive change in the society as well as economy, not just economy. Is this making sense to everyone? So not only the economy should produce more goods and services, but slowly and gradually the idea was that it should be so well distributed so as to subserve the common good, reflected in our idea of inclusive development. So you can see how development as a process is operating. Slowly and gradually, inclusive development started combining itself with human development, sustainable development. So you can see that depending upon which political belief you come from, depending upon which society you want to address, depending upon which nation or state you are dealing with, the idea of development changes, and it has different meaning to everyone. But one thing that you can take from this discussion is what UPSC expects you to understand, that development is never static, but rather it is a process. But when any society aspires to develop economically, socio-economically, inclusive, in an inclusive fashion, wants to develop the human potential, wants to carry out development in a sustainable way, so that we do not, impede the chances of the future generations to have the similar economic and social growth. That is what sustainability means. While all of that is a process, there are a lot of stakeholders which participate in this process. Development as a process. There are various stakeholders. For instance, government is one stakeholder. In fact, Modi ji would want you to believe that he is the only stakeholder in development process to create Viksit Bharat, developed India. By 2000, and then the next two digits are replaceable very easily. So you can see that there are a lot of stakeholders which, in that sense, they help develop the society and the state. For example, the government. Government having monopolistic characteristics, it is internally supreme, and especially when liberal state modified to a welfare state, the government is now responsible to provide for almost all the needs that you require for survival. For instance, the government, unlike the previous state, the current state is taking care of your food if you are not able to afford, taking care of your shelter if you are not able to do it or by your own. It is responsible for your education. In case of undeserved unemployment in rural area, you have the right of 100 days of employment. So you can see that the government is participative as a participant in the development process. But do you think it's only the government which is participating? No, it's just not the government. It's the private sector also which participates, depending upon the leverage given by the government to the private sector. So for example, in last 5 to 7 years, we have seen how few of the private corporate sectors are now monopolizing, especially the economic growth, and especially the infrastructure growth. So there is one corporate firm who might replace Airports Authority of India in some time from now. So you can see that while you can say that it is an entrepreneurship driven by the motivation of profit, but you cannot deny their participation in the development process. In fact, depending upon which country you talk about, for instance, if we were to have this discussion in American society, in American context, you can see that it is the private sector which monopolizes the development process. Because everything except for education is provided by the private sector. So health is provided by so there are no government hospitals, there are no government bus services, there are no government transport facilities. Everything is privately driven. Everything is driven by the profit orientation, and the expectation is that if everything would be governed by the private interests, it is to the best interest of the society as well. So you can see how the development process is it is a result of participation of or interaction of government as well as the private venture. But there is a third party to the development process as well, and that third party, as you might have realized, is neither the part of the government and nor the part of profit motive entrepreneurship or profit orientation. And that is called civic society. The part of the society which is neither the government nor the employees of the government nor connected with the government in any fashion, and neither a part of any corporate, business, private activity, nothing. Right? And these are the people who are known as civic society. Civic society are a part of society which are decoupled from the rest two important participants of development process. The study of modern human society is the study of an understanding of increasing influence of civic society. When a group of people in their private capacity, not as a representative of the government, not as an owner of business, not for the orientation of earning income, when they come together for some action, it is called civic society. For instance, you must have heard about non-governmental organization. The name itself is communicating that we are different from government. We are non-government. Look at the emphasis that the nomenclature puts to communicate the idea we are non-state actors. We are not connected with the state. It's making sense to everyone? Then you must have heard about pressure groups or interest groups. Group or association, we will talk about what these, but just want to check upon whether we have heard about these names or not. Yeah? Okay. Now, any kind of society, especially in a democratic framework, it is understood that will be able to protect some of the core guarantees of the constitution, and if not the constitution, but morality. So for instance, everyone expects in UK to be treated equally because that their fundamental law is rule of the law, AV-DICE, and we have seen all of that we have done in polity. So even though they do not have a written constitution, as long as you are in Britain, as long as you are in UK, you are expected to be treated equality before the law. As long as you are in US, there are certain core bill of rights that you are extended to. Correct. The problem is that the concern of the politics to encode minimum protection against the state shows how lethal the state can be. Otherwise, you would not be so concerned to start part 3 by Article 12, then Article 13, and to end it with Article 32. क्योंकि आपको हमेशा पता है that state is capable of immense devastation. That's why you are always very skeptical about the use or misuse of the powers of the state. So while it is true that there is no right if it is not legalized, so writing down fundamental right, codifying them into the basic text serves the purpose. The problem is that they are not self-effectuating. You have to activate them. So for example, before going through the polity foundation classes, did you guys have any idea Article 21 is so wide? Or maybe before reading Lakshmikant, did you have any understanding as to how wide the set of rights that you are entitled to? Now, this is an extreme elite crowd that I am interacting to, which had no idea how many more rights that you are entitled to. So you are like top 1%. Now imagine if this is the level of awareness of rights in top 1%, what would be the level of awareness in 99% of the people? And so, government knows this very well. Lesser the understanding and awareness of rights, easier it is for us to govern. Number one. Secondly, private entrepreneurship do not care. They also, in some way, create negative externalities. So for example, any industry creates pollution. Now, for that industry, is it not better people don't know that they have right to clean environment? Of course. If industry has to expand, they have to cut down trees. They have to release a lot of polluted effluent into the environment. So would it not be better for the industry people to keep or at least ensure that the level of awareness of rights of the people is at a very low level. And so that is why you can see, just from the point of view of rights, you can see how important civic society is. Why civic society is important? Number one is that with respect to the level of right enjoyed in the society, they do not have any direct conflict. Let me substantiate this with an example as to what I am trying to say. In last 4 to 5 years, there is a lot of hue and cry about a developmental project, Polavaram, which is a multi-purpose project, and any kind of dam or reservoir construction for irrigation, for drinking water supply, for hydroelectricity has always been a conflicting socio-economic goals for us, because obviously you cannot fuel India without electricity, but at the same time you have to compromise on ecology. So many people have to be rehabilitated, resettled, and more often than not आपके घर के पीछे डैम नहीं बन रहा होता है, ये ट्राइबल्स के घर के पीछे डैम बन रहा होता है, तो आप कभी नहीं डूबते. So there is always an identified tribal group that gets violated as a community, uplifted, uprooted. For example, in this case, 2 lakh tribals are expected to be uprooted from their forested areas because such a vast land will be submerged. So although the government is ready to relocate them, but it's just forest, as we see, is just trees. No, but for people who live there, it is an entire natural and social ecosystem. It's just not natural ecosystem, it is also a social ecosystem. It looks like that the government might go ahead with this plan. And why that could be possible is because in this particular protest, these 2 people, or what I think, what they epitomize is the civic society action. So whenever we think about NGO workers, we think about Badi Bindi Gang. Whenever we think about a JNU person, this is what comes to our mind. And these 2 set of people, which actually, it's a good, for me it is an image of what general perception, what preconceived notion people have about civic society action, were missing, because the government had already identified the civic society activists who might play a role to prevent this project of Polavaram from taking off. So there was no civic society action, and there was nothing which could prevent the state from doing so, unlike this particular case, which was 10 years old, where you can see the people, particularly vulnerable tribal groups, PVTGs, Dongaria Konds. There is a Niyamgiri hill, is an area in Odisha. Vedanta wanted to acquire huge chunk of Niyamgiri mines for extraction of bauxite so that it can be refined into aluminum. They wanted to set up a plant. When the idea was floated in 2004, that was NDA government, they cleared that, and UPA government came to power. They facilitated the creation, but slowly and gradually it started emerging that the forest clearance, the Forest Right Act clearance, all of the clearances that the company had shown to the government, they were illegal. So for example, you know that in forested areas, the approval of the Gram Sabha becomes compulsory for the use of the land. The company had shown that they had conducted the Gram Sabha across the forested areas, but later on it was revealed, and a case was filed in the Supreme Court, PIL, that sir, all of the clearances that they show on paper are illegally obtained. Who do you think played the role here? Do you think the people that you see on the screen, they would have the understanding of fundamental rights? They would know the procedures? Do you think they would even know the Supreme Court? And that's where Survival International comes into play. It led the campaign to make people first aware about what's going on in Niyamgiri. Secondly, they started a program of crowdfunding so that they can hire the best lawyers in the Supreme Court to lead the case, lead the charge against the government, and then eventually they Supreme Court cancelled the allocation of the forest clearances. Supreme Court cancelled the whole project. And you can see that how the civic society comes into the defense of the most vulnerable of the society. So if you are rich in the society, you don't need civic society action. You can buy your freedom. You can buy your liberty. Right? एक ऐसे लिखना पड़ सकता है 300 वर्ड्स का. But beyond that, everything is possible. If you are politically connected, you don't have to worry about anything. But imagine the situation of people deprived and marginalized in the society. What do they have? Government is after their rights. Private interest is after their rights. Who will defend their rights? It is the civic society action. So this is the most extreme example. So you can see the timeline. 2010, Ministry of Environment and Forest rejects forest clearance. 2013, Supreme Court mandates local Gram Sabha decision, and then Ministry of Environment Forest officially rejects Vedanta mining proposal. The stars of this campaign were Niyamgiri Suraksha Samiti, Survival International, and Amnesty International. All three together led the charge and were able to prevent the largest mining project in India at that point of time that was proposed. So that is the power of civic society. Now the question is, from where do these two people derive so much of power? पैसे तो इनके पास है नहीं, वो तो दिखता है इन लोगों से, शक्ल से. गांव में ये लोग रहते हैं, ट्राइबल से इंटरेक्ट करते हैं, जेएनयू की डिग्री होती है, तो इतने पावरफुल कैसे बन जाते हैं ये? मयूख को पसंद नहीं आते हैं ये लोग. फरीदाबाद में दिखते हैं क्या मयूख ये लोग? फरीदाबाद वाले क्या मार के भगा तो नहीं देते कहीं? है ना? So what do you think, Mayuk? What makes them so powerful?
I think they get a lot of funding, sir.
Okay. So government से कितनी फंडिंग मिलती होगी? मतलब, so do you think their funding can be comparable with the funding of the government or the private agencies? Do you think they are comparable with each other? Right? So what do you think makes them powerful? Other people can participate, just like, so we are meeting after months, right? Do not forget, two-way interaction is the essence. Abhishek.
I think the fundamental rights that open them, give them a lot more power to question the government, to protect, to secure protection from a, fundamental rights give them a right to seek assurances against the state or other people as well.
No, Abhishek, exactly. Let me rephrase the question. Why do you think civic society would be more effective than private and government? Or do you think that's not even the right statement to begin with?
So they're able to garner more public support for their causes.
Public support for their causes.
They come from the public. So
They come from the public is the key. Yes, they come from the public. Correct. So what differentiates civic society, private and government? Palguna? Yeah.
what differentiates these three groups?
Hmm.
The motivation behind the interest.
So you're saying that when you will clear the exam, you will have low motivation than an NGO? Is what you want to say?
What I'm trying to say is that
Yeah.
a non-governmental organization, they're trying to say that they are strictly not coming from the government, but
Hmm.
they could be influenced by a private sphere,
Hmm.
conglomerate sphere. But when you say civic society, they are one who wants to isolate themselves both from the private conglomerates as well as the government. So they form the middle group. They're in that gray area where they're not really influenced by money, or they're not even influenced by the interest of people. So
That's the crux. That's the crux. Hardik, can you be a little bit louder? Yeah. Vested interest is the key. Vested interest is the key, and also you should have a better mic. So what is key as Palguna? Mayuk, you wanted to make the same point?
Yes, sir. I wanted to make a point that like come from the Abhishek also,
Hmm.
that they come from the people and such their grassroots mobilization is very strong.
Hmm.
So I think they would have people will trust them more than the government.
Yeah. Let me raise the
Yeah.
volume. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Huh. Bolo.
Yes, I said I wanted to make a similar point. Like come from the Abhishek and all, they come from the people.
Understood.
The grassroots mobilization is very strong.
Correct. So all of us have this common sense to understand that when a civic society person approaches people as opposed to a private individual or as opposed to the government servant, one thing that is for sure that they have moral and you can say normative legitimacy. They have a very high element of entitlement because they are devoid of any conflict of interest. So when a government official goes to meet people, people are already skeptical because people have this impression of corruption. They have this red tapeism in the mind. The previous interaction with the state and the government has, in most cases, resulted in negative interaction. Is it not? कि जब मैं उस दिन आया था ऑफिस में तब तुम ऑफिस इस ऑफिस से उस ऑफिस भेज रहे थे, इस डेस्क से उस डेस्क भेज रहे थे. आज क्या हो गया कि ये आदमी बाइक से मेरे घर पे आया है. देयर इज इमीडिएटली विल बी अ सेंस ऑफ डाउट कि कुछ तो गड़बड़ है. दया व्हाई दिस पर्सन has come to my door when I was visiting this person for 3 months. He never entertained my cause, and now suddenly this person appears. कुछ तो चल रहा है background में. Private people, why would they even care to interact with they are busy in their own profit driven orientation. So only people who are devoid of any kind of conflict of interest, and this being devoid of the conflict of interest gives them extremely high sense of moral entitlement. That's why when Modi ji says इसमें मेरा क्या, इसमें मुझे क्या, is the tagline of the civic society action कि भाई ये मैं अपने लिए कर ही नहीं रहा हूं, ये तो अपने प्रॉफिट के लिए कर रहे हैं, ये अपनी सत्ता के लिए कर रहे हैं, मैं किसके लिए कर रहा हूं आप बताओ ना, मैं आपसे पैसे चार्ज कर रहा हूं इस चीज के. So you can see that the connect is established immediately because of this moral sense which is immediately communicated to the people if you are a part of an SHG, if you are a part of a pressure group, if you are a part of an NGO, or if you are a donor. Is this making sense to everyone? Also, by being the part of this state and by being the part of the private orientation gives you a lot of procedural checks. It keeps you, it does not give you the flexibility or autonomy of the operation. Because if you work as a government servant, you have to follow the rules. If you work as a private entrepreneurship, again you are bound by the private interest, which does not gives you flexibility, but by being part of the civic society gives you extreme autonomy to operate. So autonomy and flexibility in operation is what makes them extremely nimble and agile. So if the cause, if they can cater to almost any cause because they are not bound by the constitution, they are not bound by the laws, they are not bound by the rules, although they are operating within the confines of the law, but there is no order that they have to take in order to initiate a civic action, and that this autonomy gives them the freedom to be the first responder in the times of crisis. So you can see, as soon as there is a flood, you will see Aid Khalsa. As soon as there is an earthquake, you will see Aid Khalsa, Goonj as an NGO, RSS people immediately present there. Government employees cannot be present. Private sector would never want to be present in such a situation. So whoever goes and extends the helping hand in the crisis disaster management is always remembered by the society. कि जब हमारा घर टूट गया था तो ये लोग खड़े थे हमें बाहर निकालने के लिए. आप 5 साल बाद भी मिलोगे तो आपकी शक्ल याद रहेगी उसको, आपने जान बचाई है. Is this making sense to everyone? So they become the responders, but especially in the crisis management, they become responder in all kinds of needs because of all the flexibility and autonomy that they have. So when we'll discuss all the specific civic society groups and all of that, we'll see. But the most peculiar aspect which we have done in judicial activism, if you remember in judicial activism, we understood how judicially got slowly and gradually activated through the activators of activism. If you remember, we have seen that, of course, one of the intent of the judiciary was to increase the oversight over executive and legislature, but one of the intent of the judiciary, or how the intent was transferred to the judiciary, was, for instance, PUCL versus Union of India. What is PUCL? Association for Democratic Reforms versus Union of India. Who is MC Mehta? The case laws that we have done in Article 21, MC Mehta epitomizes civic society action. Do you think the government officials have the freedom to go to the court? They will be suspended if they go to the court. Do you think private people have the time and the intent to go to the court to get the rights? No. So who are the only people who can pursue litigation? It is the people who are deprived of any conflict of interest. कि भाई मेरा तो कोई कॉन्ट्रैक्ट भी नहीं है गवर्नमेंट में, मैं गवर्नमेंट के खिलाफ केस कर सकता हूं. अगर गवर्नमेंट नाराज हो भी रही है तो हो जाए, कौन सा मैं गवर्नमेंट से पैसे ले रहा हूं, कौन सा मेरा कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है गवर्नमेंट को. There is no conflict of interest, and so it gives them absolute leverage and freedom to pursue the litigation. And now you can understand what makes them extremely potent elements for development process. These are the people who treat development as an industry. So private people treat the production of goods and services as the industry. The government treats law and order, maintenance, management, and perpetuation of sovereignty as the industry. There are people who treat development process as an industry. These are known as the development process industry, civic society. You must have heard about various names. So for example, to begin with, there are multiple people who want to feed on this process. Might be here, could be there, could be there. Could be sustainability. So, Danish, where would you plot MC Mehta? Okay, so I said that there are different people, different, you can say, participants to development process who want to treat this as an industry, which means that their labor or industriousness would be rooted somewhere here. So I said that some could target economic growth, some could target socio-economic growth, some could target sustainability, human development. So for instance, Mr. MC Mehta's focus is on sustainability as a civic society person. Amnesty International, or for instance, People's Union for Civic Liberties, focus on democracy or democratic development. Their whole idea is to preserve the essence of Indian democracy and to transition it from procedural to substantive democracy, the democracy that is deliberative. So for instance, PRS, the website that we use to get the ideas about parliamentary proceedings, data, new bills and acts, is again, their whole industry is to make MPs informed so that they can keep the executive accountable, democracy. Is this making sense to everyone? Any doubts so far? Anyone? ऐसा कैसे हो सकता है? Thank you, Palwana. पूछो?
Sir, apart from the reasons of, let's say, self-satisfaction and probably looking forward to getting into a career of politics, what could be the possible legitimate motivations of these civic societies?
I think they could be genuinely empathetic to the causes. Why do you discount the fact that people can be genuinely compassionate?
I get that, sir. I meant apart from that.
No, so apart from that, it could be a hidden underlying motive of politics. So that's what we'll see, because the civic society establishes the connect most easily This is the path that Arvind Kejriwal followed. He entered into the minds and hearts through civic society, and then sort of transacted the whole social capital into political capital. So India Against Corruption was a civic society action, and now you can imagine the kind of support these people got when they were the part of civic society. Until 2013, when they float a political platform, and since then the support has been declining. That's the difference between the government and the civic society. Is it making sense to everyone? Okay, so let's now move on to, the notes have been given in the slide, so you can see that whatever we have discussed is right there. So I think we have seen this diagram some in foundation classes also. So the society consists of three fabric, and you can see that green fabric is devoid of any kind of conflict of interest because it has all the things that we have discussed, because of which it is able to or capable of doing this, whereas government, private sector CSOs face a lot of problem. So please quickly read this to see if we are able to understand this, because I'm going to distribute, unlike previously in polity classes, we are going to have these PPTs as notes now. Palguna?
Sir, is it possible to tell what the exact difference is between civic society organizations, NGOs, self-help groups, and pressure groups?
Yeah, we are coming exactly to that. Aritru?
So what exactly is that large overhead in the government?
The government has to maintain massive human resource to achieve a particular task, which makes it extremely burdensome. So for example, the intervention that might be required to solve a minor problem requires massive expenses. Does that make sense? Clear to everyone? Diya, Gauri, Vani, Shriya, please turn on your camera. Varun, Danish.
So the doubt may be a little weird, सा थोड़ा सा दो parts में से.
हाँ.
First of all, civic society organizations are they registered in any way government के साथ? कि मतलब
There are some that are registered. For example, for NGOs there is a proper registration process, but for others like pressure groups there is no registration process. There is no law that regulates a pressure group. So the pressure groups largely are informal. So for example, you cannot say that RSS is registered as so and so under this and this and act. But definitely for PUCL, for Amnesty International, for all of them, they have the licenses to operate as NGOs.
And sir, another the other part was कि what signifies कि ये civic society organization civic society के लिए काम कर रही है and it is not working in a way like, for instance, it could also promote regionalism or terrorism in the worst case scenarios क्योंकि लोगों की demands को supply करने के लिए. So
बिल्कुल हो सकते हैं, बिल्कुल हो सकते हैं. तुम तो ऑलरेडी ब्यूरोक्रेट की भाषा बोल रहे हो. You're already speaking like a MHA official. That this is their 5-star NGOs. वो word use किया था ना अमित शाह ने. 5-star NGOs. just to show how much money they have. That while they go to the tribal areas, they leave the 5-star hotels to go to the tribal areas, participate in the protest, and then they come back to stay there. So, I mean, of course, you cannot deny the fact that there can be some NGOs that can operate in anti-state activities, participate in the ways which we would not want them to. But that is also applicable to the government officials, right? So, do you think that by doing corruption, you are not undermining internal security? By taking bribes, you are not compromising on development? So that is applicable to the other sectors. So that is something that is common to all of them. But what makes them unique is what we have discussed so far. Okay, all right. So let's now understand different kinds of civil society organization which Palguna had asked. And it is important to address in a very general way because we are going to look at each and every one of them very specifically. So we are going to deal with pressure groups, NGOs, donor, charities, SHGs distinctly. But before we go there, let's have an understanding as to what these terms denote exactly so that we are not confused. So for instance, donor and charity is something everyone understands. A group of people or maybe a person who has operated in non-civic society institutions like government, and they have earned a lot of money, maybe saved a lot of money, we don't know. And then might have operated in private profit driven motive. With that motive, they ended up acquiring a lot of wealth. And now they want to give back to the society in the form of philanthropy. And for the causes that are generally very well defined, they set out some funds in the form of trust, charitable trust, in the form of other institutions. And that is what the donor or charity is meant generally. Now, donor and charity has a small difference. Donor is generally for the causes that are not on the basis of traditional ethnic lines. So, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a donor because they contribute to education, girl healthcare, and development in Africa. But Marwadi Seva Sangh is a charity because while by serving the similar purpose, in one aspect you are trying to perpetuate the caste. So all those donations that are rooted in religion, caste, region, they are generally known as charities, and all of them which go beyond this, they are known as donors. So that is a very subtle difference between donors and charities. But in both of them, you can understand the common thing is you give the money and then you decouple yourself from the civic society. So it's not like Bill and Melinda Gates are actually going to the ground to serve the purpose. They have set up $100 billion fund, which is now funding the civic society action. Is this clear to everyone? Hello? क्लास में हूँ सर, क्लास में हूँ, क्लास की बात करता हूँ बाद. So donors and charities act as the fuel. They are not the car themselves, but they are the fuel which can drive any car, which can fuel any car. So if the funding goes to let's say environmental activism, it will get the boost. If it goes into let's say women education, it will get the boost. So wherever it gets plugged in, it just accelerates the pace of development, or at least the civic society activism. That is donor and charity. Then you have self-help groups. Self-help groups are, for instance, when I see you guys sharing notes with each other on WhatsApp group, that can also be known as self-help groups. It's a group that you guys yourself have created because some people decided not to wake up at 8 in the morning, and then they thought, why not take the initiative so that other people, when they write notes, they could just easily create the PDF and share it on the group. So you can see that it is a group created out of self-volunteerism by you guys. So, and the purpose is not to help someone outside of the group, but to help each other only. So you can see how you can differentiate between donors, charities, and self-help group is the target audience. The target audience in self-help group is always the members of the group. So all those people, and if their parents are involved in small businesses, medium scale businesses, they must have set up a committee. how many of us know about the committee system? Yeah, so so there are like 10 shop owners, shopkeepers, they decide to float a fund where everyone contributes equally to the fund. And whenever a person needs the money, that person is extended a helping hand of some finances where the loan has, the interest amount is absolutely very close to zero. So that saves you in the times of financial crisis. You don't have to go to the banks, which obviously have a lot of paperwork. Then there are high interest rates. If you get the money, if you do not get the money from banks, you have to go to the informal lending institutions, which even are shadier. They charge very high interest rates. So it is better that 10 people come together, put 2 lakh rupee each, the corpus becomes 20 lakh. And whoever needs money up till 20 lakhs is extended that help from the group within. So it's like no one has, if anyone does not have a notes for the fact that they skipped the class, you have the availability of notes immediately. So it serves the purpose for everyone, right? But just like one person ends up making all the notes and always sharing it, that's the biggest demerit of self-help group also. Even if there is one person who is financially imprudent, that leads to the collapse of whole self-help groups. So you can see that that is what self-help group means. Now we are left with the pressure group and NGOs. First, let's understand pressure groups, because that is not only the first thing that we will discuss today, but that's also very easily communicated through its name. A group of people who have come together to put pressure on the government, to put pressure on the policy making process, to put pressure on the state institutions to serve some purpose. So for example, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, Farmers Union, they are a group of people who are motivated by a particular cause or who want to fulfill a particular task. They want the government, for example, not to go ahead with a policy making or to bring some policy change, both positive and negative. Almost every economic operation in India has a group of people who are only involved in that profession. So you can clearly see what separates an NGO from a pressure group is the target audience. Will you get any person appreciating Nehru in RSS? The chances are very, very close to zero, right? Coherent set of people coming together form a homogeneous group, all of them very low but not zero. Yeah, you might have some people. Now you can see that when a farmers union is formed, all the people are farmers to begin with. Some could be rich farmers, some could be poor farmers, some could be average middle income farmers, but all of them must be farmers to belong to the farmers union as a pressure group. If you want to be a participant in Federations of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, you have to be an industrialist, but not any industrialist. Your company must have performed 50,000 crore of revenue in last 3 years. Only then you will get an invitation to participate in FICCI. So you can see homogeneity in the group making, because you want to get together to either force the government not to take certain tax decisions, but to force the government to take some industrial related decisions, some decisions related to import duty. Does that make sense? So you can see that the target audience of pressure group has a very homogeneous membership, and whatever their cause is directly impacts their members. So if the farmers bill were passed and if the veto applied by the pressure groups would not have worked, it would have impacted all the farmers who were the participants to the protest. Unlike an NGO, where the people who are a part of NGO are not directly or indirectly people who are impacted by that cause. So people who work in Amnesty International, they don't work because their own home is being or is about to be submerged, but they are moved by the concern of some other person's home being submerged without the due process of law. So they initiate that action. Now, with or without their activism, their own home, their own family is not being impacted. So if an illegal land acquisition proposal by the private sector for the construction of expressway is not followed through a legal action, none of the people who are involved or leading the NGO, their own homes are being acquired or their own properties being acquired. So you can see that is the basic differentiation between different kinds of organs. So the first thing, Palguna, does that answer the question?
Yes, sir.
Any doubt so far? कि किसमें क्या अंतर होता है? So what do you think? What should be the most lethal one? Pressure groups, NGO, donor, charity, सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप, क्या सबसे पावरफुल होगा? अरित्रो बोलेगा पॉलिटिकल पार्टी, बिकॉज बंगाल इज अ पार्टी सोसाइटी. मयूक, yeah, interest, yeah. The cause has to be? Of course, Mayuk. मतलब क्या पर्टिकुलर होना पड़ेगा? मतलब कैसे आप ऐसे रैंडम बुलाओगे लोगों को पार्टी करने के लिए? मतलब कहने का यह है कि कुछ कॉज होना पड़ेगा तभी लोग धूप में आके खड़े होंगे ना. कुछ तो कॉज जेन्युइन होना पड़ेगा, वेल डिफाइंड तो कॉज होना पड़ेगा, नहीं तो कैसे कोई आएगा? कैसे मोटिवेट करोगे लोगों को? वो तो होना ही पड़ेगा. Okay, so let's start with the first one, which is pressure group. First, let's understand the meaning of the pressure groups and how and why they are used interchangeably with the another word which is very often used, but in general studies we should use them interchangeably. Interest groups. And now I think if we use the word interest groups, you can see a group of people united by a common interest, right? United by interests, divided by caste and religion. That's the story of interest group in India. Now, so you can see that the common interest that they need to serve is, for example, as many interests that you can have in the society, you can have as many interest groups as well. So you name a particular interest and then you can Google it. You will find that there is one particular interest, at least one particular interest group that serve that purpose. You serve any particular interest. It could be an interest related to, for example, environmental concern. There would be 100%, at least 100 of them, pressure groups. But if you will have an interest group which is concerned about environmental degradation, what makes them an interest group is that all those people must belong to an area which is environmentally impacted, CHIPCO. So all the people who participated in the CHIPCO movement, a social movement, again a very different word which is not required for the lines of the syllabus that we are decoding right now. So social movement is a sustained civic society action defined by an organized leadership and a hierarchy, but that's not in the syllabus, so we are not going to read that or understand that. So you can see that all those people who were participant to CHIPCO, they were in interest groups. But they were in informal interest groups. They did not get themselves registration under any formal legal process. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so the interest groups, or how they operate or why they operate, obviously they want to achieve a particular interest. Now that particular interest could be preventing the government and the state from effectuating a policy, or that could be about forcing the government to achieve some policy. So what makes an interest group? An interest group is that all the people who are a part have a common purpose, common interest, and then In order to achieve that common interest, multi-pronged policy can be adopted. For example, they could gather at a particular place and make a speech, Article 19(1)(a). They could also gather at a particular place, assembly, and also they could have a formal association. And now you can see why Article 19 is at the heart of civic society action. Now, utilizing the rights that are given under Article 19(1)(a), B, and C, they could mobilize the support, for example, by writing articles in the newspaper, freedom of speech and expression, editorials. So that's why you see that when you read Indian Express or The Hindu, for example, M.N. Swaminathan writes a lot of articles frequently on the topics related to agriculture. That is nothing but an effort by a pressure group to set the narrative, set the discourse in the society. So when you write the article, you put forward the ideas of your interest group so that more and more people are made aware about the interests that you want to achieve. So that other people are convinced, so that other people also start supporting your idea beyond your own narrow common interest groups. So how can you mobilize the support? You can mobilize the support by writing articles, for example, by making the use of social media. That mobilization can be in the form of attendance into the rally. So you can see that farmers union oftenly demonstrate the power by showcasing the number of tractors that participated in the rally. While the people of FICCI in Bangalore and Mumbai, they're smiling that we are just 38, 40 people. And look at them, they're showing 40,000 tractors. But that works, and that also works. Because one group of people, although numerically very small, have the finances to buy and the support. Other people just have numbers. So how do they do it? They mobilize the support, and by demonstrating the conversation, discourse in the society, so many articles published for a particular cause or against a cause, and then by showing the numbers, they want to tilt the decision making for the government, because for the state, what matters is the discourse and the numbers. So the whole idea of pressure group operation is to mobilize the support towards their own interest by influencing the thought process and the vote bank. So they do not directly participate in the political process, but they want to influence the political process by showcasing the threat of their number and their ability to showcase, by their ability to set the narrative in the society. That if you do not do what we want you to do, then we will change the discourse against you. People will not vote. And look at 10,000 people who participated in the rally. And in that sense, they can often be confused with political parties, because what political parties are? They are the group of people who want to achieve an interest. They are a group of people who set the narrative, discourse, and they are the group of people who wants to increase their numbers. And they want the people with the similar thought process to become and to come on and join in their own platforms. So what could be the difference? The only difference is that while political parties tried to contest for state power, the pressure groups are not interested. Because pressure groups have attended my lecture. They know that as soon as they become the part of the state by floating a political party, they will lose the autonomy, flexibility, the moral superiority. So when you go to interact with a person in a Fortuner with a BJP flag on it, people know कि ये तो वोट मांगने आया. But if you just remove the flag, the entire conflict is gone. You are not there to serve your own purpose. So we'll come to that, Megha. Let's move sequentially. So you can see that you should never be confused about an interest group, pressure group, and a political party. It is important to be addressed because this could be a very simple question in mains. Differentiate between political parties and pressure groups. So obvious difference is that they are directly contesting for power. They contest power. They don't contest the state power. They are contesting for power, the ability of a person A to get things done which B otherwise would not have done. The traditional understanding of power. They are also trying to increase their power, but what they are not looking for is the power that is given in the form of authority. Remember the first 2-3 lectures of polity, the differentiation between authority and power. So they are looking for authority. They are only looking for non-state power. At the same time, there are certain subtle differences as well. To begin with, the power is clear, but then there are certain other differences as well. For instance, when a political party is floated, especially relevant for Indian context, they have to contest the seats in territorial fashion. So there is a constituency where first the past post will be applicable. Correct? So whoever gets the highest number in a particular constituency becomes an MP or an MLA or whatever is the case. Now, because they are bound by the necessity of first past the post, political parties can never be very narrow in their outlook. They are forced into social coalitions. So a political party can never say to a particular social group, "Chal nikal yahan se," except in some rare cases where the other vote bank in total is 15%. It can be done. But a pressure group most likely is very narrowly defined. Yes. An interest group or a pressure group has the freedom to base their membership in a very, very narrowly defined set of parameters. So for example, any particular national or regional party, if it has to win an election anywhere in India, they cannot ignore multiple caste, multiple class coalitions. But a pressure group formed for the purpose of farmers can say to the industrialists, "You're not needed here, you're not welcome here." That's always possible. Does that make sense to everyone? So you can see that when it comes to their political interests, political program, they cannot be very narrow, they have to be broad-based because of the necessity of winning elections. And this is when they start laughing. कहा था चुनाव मत लड़ो, फालतू में ऑटो वालों को भी कुछ प्रॉमिस करना पड़ेगा, बिजली भी फ्री करनी पड़ेगी, हेल्थ में भी और एजुकेशन में भी करना पड़ेगा, महिलाओं को फ्री की टिकट भी देनी पड़ेगी. क्यों? ये तो पहले तो इंडिया अगेंस्ट करप्शन वाज ओनली अबाउट जस्ट करप्शन, a very narrowly defined but penetrative, incisive goal. So that is what the narrowly defined goals on one hand deter them from expanding their membership, but this is what makes them extremely, extremely incisive and effective. Because when a farmer union will speak about the cause of the farmer, not only the farmers will listen, but the government will also listen. And government had to yield. Now you can see the rise in the stature of this interest group, that a set of laws passed by parliament, both houses, signed by the president, had to be taken back because a pressure group did not agree. So you can see how that you can see the increment in the power of the civic society as compared to the state. That if they, so in constitution we see that the president has veto, but in reality we are seeing someone apart from president also has a veto now, and that is a narrowly defined effective pressure group. While they have to be broad based, and that compromises on their effectivity, or you can say that effectiveness. So they are not as effective as the pressure groups are. Also, because of the obvious constitutional and legal requirements, political parties can never be openly caste and religion based. So you can never have openly party like Brahman and Bania National Party of India. So because you couldn't name that, you had to name it. It is impossible to say that. Now, but you have openly caste-based pressure groups because there is no legal, procedural, constitutional check that exists on pressure groups. So you can have openly traditional ethnicity-based pressure groups to serve the particular interest of that ethnicity. And so you can see that they are bound by the constitutional morality, at least on paper. They're bound by constitutional morality. This is what makes them compromise. So even though a particular political party has to serve a particular caste, they cannot be openly about it. So RJD cannot rename itself as a MY party. It is impossible. Their notification will be cancelled. Now, you can see that they are bound by the social morality, social mores, the socially understood values of or judgments about what is good or bad, and that is why you have as many castes. There are at least 10 pressure groups operating for almost each and every, especially the non-Dalit upper castes or forward or other backward classes. So when you go to the urban areas, you will see dharmshalas on the basis of caste, where a rich person from that caste wanted the people from his or her own caste to have free stay when they go to the urban areas. So when you go and show them the ID and through family linkage you prove you belong to their caste, they are not going to charge any money from you as long as you want to stay. I think all of us are exposed to these things, right? Kunal सबसे पहले, हाँ सर. हम ही लोगों ने सारी धर्मशालाएं बनाई हैं भारत की. All right. Is this clear to everyone? So you can see that they are very narrowly defined. They have a loose organizational structure. Unlike political parties, this is one subtle difference that we need to understand about the pressure groups, or what the pressure group is, or how they are supposed to serve their purpose. So you can see that the way to differentiate between them and political parties is clear. Is this clear to everyone? Yeah, okay. So obviously there are a lot of examples that you can have in India from across the globe that will be included in the PPT. So let's understand what is the role that they are serving and what are the problems that arise out of the functioning of the interest groups. And especially let's compare them with the world's first and the foremost pressure group industry, that is American pressure group industry. But first let's understand the positive role played by the pressure groups. Do you think the pressure groups perform any positive role? Do you think that they are serving any purpose? What is the first thing that you can see when the pressure groups activate themselves? Palguna?
They are noticed, sir. They are noticed.
Exactly, they're noticed. So what do you mean by they're noticed?
They garner attention.
They generate attention. What happens as a result of attention generation? What Palguna has said, that to begin with, let's not go into whether they were able to achieve the purpose that they had set out for themselves or not. Let's not go into that. But if you read a newspaper article and if you see a rally was organized by so and such a such association, the first thing is that you notice it. The fact that you noticed it has served the basic purpose of creating awareness about the interests. So you can see that whenever a rally or a protest is organized, not necessarily the purpose is to force the government immediately. The purpose is that by blocking the traffic, By making people wait on the national highway, we will make people curious कि भाई साहब क्या हो गया आगे. तो हर आदमी पूछेगा आगे क्यों रुका हुआ है, तो सबको जवाब मिलेगा अरे कुछ रैली चल रही है. किस चीज की रैली चल रही है? अरे वो कुछ लोग ऐसे बात कर रहे हैं कि ये चल रहा है. Immediately as soon as you go, 10,000 people are the single stroke with a single act are made aware about that act, about that particular cause. They are protesting because maybe there is no electricity in the area. People are protesting because there is no water supply in the area. You are made aware of that fact. So you can see that interest can be articulated later, but people are made aware. Awareness creation. Awareness is the first objective that you achieve as a result of civic society action in the form of pressure group and interest group. So it is called political education. The fact that you made people aware about a cause is political education. It informs and mobilizes the public. So a lot of the pressure groups in India right now, they are serving this purpose. For example, India Against Corruption made us aware about the level of corruption. Already everyone knew that the level of corruption in India is high. It made us realize how high it is. It actually quantified the level of corruption in our country. So whoever could physically go to the Ram Leela Maidan went in Delhi NCR, but whoever was not the part of the exact physical rally on those days were part of the conversation which made people more and more aware, like a trickle down effect. It served the purpose for the entire cause. The narrowly defined interest of corruption, people were made aware very quickly about that. Does that make sense to everyone? Also, you can see that when you are one of the most vulnerable section of the society, marginalized section of the society, for example, devoid of much financial and social capital, more often than not, the only way left for you to defend yourself and your right is through forming an association which has a common interest. Because immediately as soon as your rights or your cause is being, let's say, under threat by the state or by a private party, obviously no donor and no charity belongs to your section. So for example, imagine a tribal group. How many billionaires do you think tribals have produced in our country? So if the tribal rights are threatened, then obviously donors and charities are the last thing that you should think about. Coming from their own society, coming from their own section. NGOs also might take time to respond. And that is where we should go back to the example that we were doing, that we underwent in case of Dongaria Kond. Survival International and Amnesty International were followed by a pressure group of people whose own interests were threatened, Niyamgiri Suraksha Samiti. If it was not for a grassroots pressure group that first emerged, it led the movement for some time on ground, which was noticed by the two international, transnational, multinational NGOs, which then lent the support. If you do not make noise yourself, no one is going to hear to you. So the noise initially comes from the interest groups. कि यहाँ कुछ हो रहा है, यहाँ हमारा जमीन ली जा रही है. अगर वो लोकल लोग पहले एक बेसिक लेवल का प्रेशर ग्रुप नहीं बनाते, कुछ थोड़ा बहुत प्रोटेस्ट नहीं करते, तो वो न्यूज मीडिया में कवरेज नहीं होता, फिर वो नोटिस नहीं होता दो एनजीओज, और फिर वो आगे की कहानी पिछले वाले एग्जाम्पल के जैसे ही होती. Does that make sense to everyone? So you can see that oftentimes, apart from one of the benefits that you can directly see apart from the direct awareness level and hence mobilization of the support is that it activates other civic society activism. It activates other CSOs. which acts like a force multiplier. If you will not fend for yourself, who else will help you? So first you will have to form a pressure group and interest group to at least begin something, and then obviously other NGOs, larger pressure groups, donors might also fund. Does that make sense to everyone? Palguna?
Sir, when these pressure groups are trying to get the attention of a lot of stakeholders,
Mm-hmm.
they will tend to infringe upon, let's say, the different rights of other people. Let's say if you block the road, your different fundamental rights are always.
Palguna, there are always reasonable restrictions on your fundamental right. So you do not have absolute right. So the rights have to be balanced by duties. So imagine the constitution has given you right to assembly. The constitution has given me right to movement. But we will have to, you can say we will have to bargain with each other. कि चलो आज आप प्रोटेस्ट कर लो, मैं आज नहीं आ रहा हूं, ताकि कल जब मैं प्रोटेस्ट करूं तो आप भी घर रुको, ये मत बोलो कि तू प्रोटेस्ट नहीं कर सकता. क्योंकि अगर हम दोनों राइट टू मूवमेंट को लड़ाने लग जाएंगे तो ना तू बैठ के प्रोटेस्ट कर पाएगा ना मैं कर पाऊंगा, है ना?
My question was to what extent they infringe.
To what extent? So I think we have already gone through these discussions in Article 19. The reasonable restrictions are in the interest of general public. What those general public interests are written in DPSPs. So we saw that DPSPs have become the markers of reasonableness. Right? All of us remember this? दो तीन ही चेहरे घूम रहे हैं yes करके. Shreya, can you explain what did I just say?
The fundamental rights are reasonably restricted up to the DPSPs and we cannot go unreasonably beyond it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Everyone, does it make sense? So you can see, starting with the first, to develop the consciousness in the population about a particular cause, to activating other CSOs to act as a force multiplier. But the biggest purpose that they serve, or why they have become more powerful, or the positive role that they serve, is about their impact on the power, both political as well as non-political power. Who remembers the discussion on power? If you remember the discussion on power, we said that power, when applied, has to be demonstrated in the form of decision making. So when I apply my power, it should reflect into some decision being made or some decision not being made, which in the absence of my power would not have been done. Right? So if I call someone and cancel my class, the class was cancelled yesterday, so that shows my power within a very small setup. That got many messages कि sir क्या हो रहा है? So that demonstrates the power. Now अगर मैं कॉल करूं कि नहीं क्लास कैंसिल करो और क्लास कैंसिल नहीं हुई, I will feel powerless कि मैं जो चाह रहा हूं वो हो ही नहीं पा रहा है. Right? So that is a very narrow sense of power. छोटे भैया होते हैं गली के जो इस तरह की पावर में बिलीव करते हैं. पावर ऑफ डिसीजन मेकिंग. देखा, मैंने बोला था करवा दिया काम तेरा. जो रियली पावरफुल लोग होते हैं, so power of decision making. I hope this is like initial polity classes when we were going through the basic values and basic terms, right? The second was the people who are little bit sophisticated, they do not operate in decision making. अंबानी डेली फोन नहीं करता मोदी जी को. That is called power of non-decision making. The really powerful people, when it comes to important decision, they set out a non-negotiable domain which is beyond decision making. कि इस पे तो तुम policy decision ले मत लेना, इसको टच किया तो देख लेना, बाकी तुम कितनी एग्रीकल्चर सब्सिडी दे रहे हो मुझे इससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. लेकिन टेलीकॉम रेगुलेटरी अथॉरिटी ऑफ इंडिया के जितने भी रूल्स हैं वो सब फ्लाउट करूंगा मैं और मोनोपोली क्रिएट करूंगा मैं. उस पर कोई डिसीजन नहीं होना चाहिए. So the ability to force the non-decision making on the state is also a very powerful idea. It really makes you powerful. So we have understood as to how globalization in that sense is a power. Because of the globalization, a lot of the decision making cannot be done. Can any of the political parties today openly write in their manifesto that we will go back on privatization and we will bring back the entire health and education to the public sector? Yeah, it can be done, but then you will immediately lose Delhi elections. That is what globalization as a power is. That is why you see BJP and Congress, they have absolutely the same economic policy. Then you wonder कि सर बुरके पे बात क्यों हो रही है, कास्ट पे बात क्यों हो रही है? क्योंकि इकोनॉमिक्स पे बात हो नहीं सकती ना, क्योंकि ग्लोबलाइजेशन एज अ पावर ने कह दिया है कि इकोनॉमिक्स पे कोई डिस्कशन नहीं होगा. वो तो लिबरलाइजेशन आगे ही जाएगा, प्राइवेटाइजेशन आगे ही जाएगा. हाँ, तुम ये बहस कर सकते हो कि मैं ज्यादा प्राइवेटाइज करूंगा, मैं कम प्राइवेटाइज करूंगा, ये बात तुम, ये फ्रीडम मैंने तुम्हें दे रखी है. So you can see that globalization is a power decision making, and then obviously we saw that the most important power that is exhibited on the people is in the form of thought control. That when through propaganda, through manipulation, through ideology, this is where the ideology, political ideology comes into play. Because when you control people's mind, then you do not have to exercise decision making and non-decision making. अंबानी रोज फोन नहीं करेगा, लेकिन साल में 2 बार तो मीटिंग करने की कोशिश करेगा. लेकिन आरएसएस के चीफ को मोदी जी से मिलने की आवश्यकता नहीं है, क्योंकि थॉट हैज बीन कंट्रोल्ड सिंस चाइल्डहुड. So RSS chief is confident that as long as these people in power, राम मंदिर तो बनेगा. कैसे नहीं बन सकता? कश्मीर में 370 हटेगा, कैसे नहीं हट सकता? Because that is the power of thought control. Once you have, that is why the modern politics pays so much of dividend on students' union and social and cultural organizations, because they help you perpetuate the thought control. Now, this is where pressure groups come into play. They disperse the thought control and non-decision making. They operate at all 3 levels. They have the ability to force decisions because of their numbers and their ability to set the discourse. They have the power to keep a lot of policy decisions outside the decision making. And some of the pressure groups work mainly in thought control, and now you place them wherever you want, you will see the negatives also. For example, farmers union comes here, छोटी छोटी बात पे रैली करके ये कर दो, वो कर दो. The Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry would be placed here. Corporate, do you see any media discourse on corporate subsidies? But you see the discourse around agriculture subsidies altogether. भाई इतना पैसा वेस्ट हो रहा है, क्या हो रहा है ये? कभी आपको पता है कि आपको तो पता ही है कि कितना कॉर्पोरेट सब्सिडी दिया जाता है इंडिया में? वे मच मोर देन द एग्रीकल्चरल सब्सिडीज. Look at how the government waives off the NPAs for the corporates, right? But for the same kind of waiver, the farmers have to protest. But do you see any protest by the industrialists? No, that is the non-decision making. But the most important or the most powerful civic society pressure group is RSS itself, and all in combination with its all daughter and sister concerns like Vidya Bharati, controlling the education, providing schools like Saraswati Shishu Mandirs and all other by Vivekanand schools in Northeast. The idea is to, through primary education, carry out thought control. So which is the most powerful pressure group in India? It is the whole ecosystem that the right-wing ideology has created. And now you can see how easily it is transacting into political process, into political power. Once you are strong in civic society, you can easily monetize into political power. This is what India Against Corruption. Rise through civic society, monetize it into political process. People say RSS has acted for 100 years. BJP actually blasted off after 1990. No political party has ever had such a sharp graph that from 2 MPs in 1984, in 14 years you had 200 MPs. So it's like 100 times growth in terms of numbers. people forgot that while only one wing of this civic society was openly concerned with state power, 99 others were working in civic society as pressure groups. So RSS has a industrial worker labor union pressure group, RSS has a farmer wing, RSS has an education wing, it has a health wing, it has an SHG wing, Sahakar Bharati. So it, as long you can think about any interest of the society, you will find a civic society pressure group controlled by RSS to work in that field. This is what makes it extremely effective as a part of the social movement. So just like Congress was effective because it was a very wide spectrum social movement, the idea is here also to create a very, very widely defined social movement which can incorporate multiple interests together. So you can see what makes the pressure group very, very really powerful is that ability to force decisions. Now the question is, how will you force the decision? You can force the decision by lobbying. So one of the most sought after ways for the pressure groups to operate is to create some representatives and then ask those representatives to take time with lawmakers, with bureaucrats. So you take them, sir आपसे मिलना था 1 घंटे के लिए, कुछ बात करनी थी. So if the political leaders have time, they might give them some time. But if the political leaders are intelligent, they will definitely give the time to a pressure group because they should realize how powerful they are. So through lobbying, they force the decision. बार बार मिलके एक ही बात कि भाई ये करना है सर, ये करना है सर, इसको देख लो, ऐसे करना है. Non-decision making is generally deployed through coercive action. For example, what we have seen in case of farmers protest, what we have seen in case of CAA and NRC, which delayed the application of this act for like 5 years. So it was Citizenship Amendment Act 2019, but then it was notified in 2024. So for 5 years it was delayed mainly because of the civic society. And their thought control exercise is in the form of school, operation in cultural arena, and so various others. So these are the good things that the pressure groups have to offer, especially in Indian context. But then at the same time, they are the merits. They can easily be used as demerits also. For example, the fact that anyone can form the pressure group, the fact that anyone has the ability to form a narrowly defined interest group, means that rich people can also form their interest group. Which means that when the rich people will form their own pressure groups, they will be far more effective than the poor people forming the pressure group. So while it gives the opportunity for the most marginalized to protect or prevent the violation of their rights, it disperses the power in the society, but when it disperses the power, it is unequal dispersion of power. That is why a well-organized group of elite people in the form of SOCHAM and FICCI are able to get way much more higher yields from the government as compared to non-elite organized or unorganized pressure groups. So the civic society action in the form of interest groups is heavily tilted in the favor of already powerful. And so it entrenches the inequality in the society. It might help the most vulnerable, that is true. But overall, if you look at the impact, the powerful industry bodies influence policy making at a way higher level than other civic society pressure groups influence the policy making. FICCI people can meet them anytime they want, the policy makers. It would not be possible for other pressure groups to even get an appointment from a minister. So this access gives them the prominence. Hardik? हार्दिक यार कुछ तुम अपने ऑडियो का करो. हाँ नहीं, अब सही है, ये सही है.
The organization
Yeah.
They also contribute more to the economy. So government will obviously focus on them कि इनकी interest है.
ये आ गए ना
सर अगर agriculture
कॉर्पोरेट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स. तो अच्छा हार्दिक, हम अच्छा इकोनॉमिक में तो हम क्या डेवलपमेंट क्या चाहते हैं? इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट चाहते हैं हम?
नहीं, बेसिक गोल तो सोशियो इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट ही है.
सोशियो इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट भी नहीं है अभी तो. अभी तो ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट है, सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट है. तो अगर तुम यही तो प्रॉब्लम है कि तुम्हारे हिसाब से डेवलपमेंट का मतलब है कि बस इकोनॉमी ग्रो हो ना. तो तुम्हें लग रहा है कि भाई जो इकोनॉमी में सबसे ज्यादा कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहा है उसका तो से ज्यादा होना चाहिए. तुम्हें समझ में नहीं आ रहा है कि जितना कंट्रीब्यूशन वो कर रहा है उससे ज्यादा तो नेगेटिव एक्सटर्नलिटीज वो क्रिएट कर रहा है, पोल्यूशन क्रिएट कर रहा है, ग्लोबल वार्मिंग में कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहा है. तो उसको मैनेज करने के लिए पैसा कहां से आएगा? ट्रांजिशन होगा लेकिन नेट बेनिफिट सोसाइटी को क्या मिल रहा है सस्टेनेबिलिटी के हिसाब से? तो उसको
दोनों चीजें एक साथ शायद नहीं कर सकते कि हर कोई भी एग्जांपल आप लीजिए सर, ब्रिटिश का इंडस्ट्रियल बोले लीजिए इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन, सर वहां पे भी शुरुआत में ऐसी हुआ था.
अंडरस्टूड, मैं बिल्कुल कह रहा हूं. लेकिन अगर तुम जो क्लाइमेट को रिजुविनेट करने की कॉस्ट को, इनइक्वालिटी को कम करने की कॉस्ट को अगर ऐड करोगे तो तुम्हें जो कंट्रीब्यूशन दिख रहा है कि वो बहुत ज्यादा कर रहे हैं वो ज्यादा है नहीं. ये कहना चाह रहा हूं मैं. वो आज नहीं तो कल तो करना पड़ेगा ना. अगर वो लंदन की टेम्स रिवर साफ हुई 30 साल में तो पैसे तो खर्च हुए होंगे ना तो सफाई करने में. तो वो पैसा भी तो उसी इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट से आएगा. तो अगर आज तुम बहुत हीरो बन रहा है कोई आदमी की 1 लाख करोड़ का जीडीपी ऐड कर दिया तो अरे भाई 50,000 करोड़ तो उधर जाने वाले हैं, अभी फॉरेस्टेशन में जाने वाले हैं, ग्लोबल वार्मिंग के इंपैक्ट को कम करने में जाने वाले हैं. फिर वो अंडरग्राउंड जो ग्राउंड वाटर कंटेमिनेशन हो रहा है उसको कैसे ठीक करोगे तुम? कितना पैसा, क्या कीमत लगाओगे ग्राउंड वाटर पोल्यूशन की? लॉन्ग टर्म में तो एवरीवन इज डेड. तो लॉन्ग टर्म की बात मत किया करो ज्यादा. 30-40 साल बाद हम लोग को किसी को इस बात से क्या कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, क्योंकि है ना. सो वो चीजें, इज दिस मेकिंग सेंस टू एवरीवन? हार्दिक इज डन? ओके. सो यू कैन सी दैट the problem is that while they're serving the purpose, one problem that immediately you can see that happens or that they create is that it perpetuates the pre-existing capital, and so that perpetuation prolongs the inequality in the society. हाथ नीचे कर ले हार्दिक. Also the problem is that while, for example, their comparison is with the political parties, they operate in legal and constitutional framework. They operate in legal and constitutional void. And because they operate in legal and constitutional void, they are devoid of any checks and balance. Because they are devoid of any checks and balance, and they are not subject to constitutional morality, they are subject to social morality. One of the set of pressure groups that probably you would not want to see in the modern society happen to be the most powerful, Khap Panchayat. For example, in northern India, if South Indian people are taking pride, Sri Ram Sene is for you. These are pressure groups. These are pressure groups that, because they are a very narrowly defined people who have gathered or grouped to protect some interest. Now, in this case, it is a caste interest, Khap-based panchayat. In case of Sri Ram Sene, it is a narrowly defined conservative religious interest. Is this making sense to everyone? So, not only the interests are narrowly defined, the problem is that slowly and gradually, when the power of the civic society increases, it starts competing with the power of the state. And that's when you can see the problem is the breakdown of the sovereignty, because sovereignty commands you to be internally supreme. No one should be higher than the state or its ability to take decisions as long as within the territory of India. That's why the preamble starts with sovereignty. We, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into sovereign, we saw that for a state to exist, the first facet is sovereignty. They should be able to demonstrate their ability to get things done within their territory. Only then other states recognize you as a state. That's what differentiates a government from the state. That's what differentiates a nation from a state. But the rise in the power of non-legitimate civic society organizations and their competing with the state ability to take decision hinders with the ability of the state to be internally supreme, and that's when you go back to the basics of politics as whether it should be encouraged or discouraged. So it subverts the institutional mechanism that have been set. The institutional decision making that has been set is that we elect the representatives who go to the state level and national level assemblies to make laws for us. What we see now is that the laws being made outside the confines of these constitutional bodies. And as we have seen, because of anti-defection law, because of globalization, because of organized political parties, and because of the rising influence of civic society organization, the laws are increasingly being passed through the parliament rather than being passed by the parliament. And there is a huge difference. What does it mean when we say that the laws are passed by the parliament? Which means that the discussion was done in the parliament, which means that the arguments were put within the parliament, which means that the parliamentarians debated over a particular bill. The fact that you see absolute decline in all of this is because the laws are being debated outside the parliament. Here, the finalization of the bill is being done here. Then the draft is being sent, and then it is being just passed because that is the requirement. So you can see that when we were trying to differentiate between power and authority, we understood the subtle differences of legitimacy or the rightfulness, right? The fact that you have the power to do something does not mean you also have the authority to do something. So for example, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is both powerful as well as authoritative. Not only he can get things done, but he can issue the order and sign them himself. Correct. So power and authority coincide there. Unlike Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, who had authority but did not have the power. There were different centers who were controlling कि भाई सर आज ये वाले 4 पेपर पे साइन जरूर कर देना. He had no power to say no. So you can see the subtle difference between power and authority. The same difference can be easily seen in today's pressure group context in our country. Where more power pressure groups have, they will yield more power. Authority lies in the state, as opposed to the previous situation where state had both power as well as authority. Now you can see increasing decoupling between the power and authority. The authority still vests because that is the legal requirement with the state institutions, with the assembly, with the parliament, but the power to exercise and in which way that authority will be exercised is now, it lies in the civic society institution, especially the pressure groups. And so you can see that decoupling of authority and the state might challenge the state, and that is why the state is so skeptical about the civic society activism. That's why the state is always extremely obsessed about the civic society activism, because the state understands and the state's institution understand the power of civic society activism. So whenever the public perception and support for civic society goes above a particular level, the states start cracking down to assert the sovereignty. Does this make sense to everyone? Any doubts so far? Okay, so you can see that the pressure groups have, just like any other thing, they have good and bad things to offer. One thing that we should also cover, it's very important from the discussion, from the point of view of discussion for the general studies, comparison with the constitution. We should also cover the comparison of pressure group between India and US. Why is it important? Is because in US not only it is very common for the interest group to organize, but there the process of consultation and lobbying has been legalized. So in India, you have never seen a political leader going to a pressure group and saying, donate 10,000 crore rupees to me and I will do this for you. मतलब open में तो नहीं होती ना ये चीज. We don't come to know about it. And that is the problem, because it has not been legalized, it is non-transparent, it is opaque. So we don't really know which pressure group or interest is being served through the lawmaking. We only come to know later on कि अच्छा वो वाला decision इसलिए लिया गया था. So for example, the day when Airports Authority of India released the contract to give tenders for the construction of new international airports in our country, in which they said that any developer who has an experience of 2 years can construct. We had no idea कि ये इतने young लोगों को कैसे आप दे सकते हो मौका एयरपोर्ट्स बनाने का. मतलब भाई अगर आप if you are making the best airports in the world, the government should expect at least 10 to 20 years of experience in constructing the airports across the globe. But now we know why it was done, because a particular firm was only registered 2 years ago. So you can see that that kind of dealing has been legalized in US, and that is why it creates the best ecosystem for pressure groups to operate. But the pressure groups in US operate mainly in Congress or with the Congress committees, for the reasons that I don't think I have to explain again, because the committee system is very strong. Congress retains most of the powers. Unlike the decline of the parliament in India, Congress still continues to be powerful in US. Also, there is complete separation of power and membership from Congress and the executive. So by influencing the lawmakers, you can get the desired result through lawmaking process. In India, it's impossible, because parliament has lost both positive as well as negative lawmaking power. So in India, if you are a pressure group, where do you go for lobbying? Will you talk to the bureaucrats and the ministers, or will you waste your time in talking to MPs, which in any way are bound by the political headquarters? You would want to conduct your lobby. You will activate yourself in party headquarters. आप जाके political party president से मिलोगे. Instead of talking to 300 individual MPs, if you are able to convince JP Nadda, Amit Shah about your cause, anyway the job is done, because whatever order they give, rest of the MPs have to vote according to that. So party headquarters become the primary location of their lobbying, apart from the permanent executive, because they continue to hold power. Permanent executive, which means some of you guys in future, you will see a lot of pressure groups approaching you after every Diwali and Holi कि सर ये घर से एकदम खेत से आम आ रहा है सर, ये आपके लिए 20 किलो. So just so that in subtle ways, whenever they need your permission for rally, you do not prevent them from you easily give the permission to conduct the rally, right? So executive. Apart from that, one unique situation in India has emerged is because of the decisive role played by the judiciary. So if you have to get a particular interest served, one way is that you influence the party headquarters, but it can anyway remotely be connected to the Constitution of India, fundamental rights. Then you can bypass party headquarters and you can immediately go and knock on the doors of the Supreme Court, and most likely your purpose will be served. Does this make sense? Because you had to prevent mining. You could not have talked to the state government headed by BJD and the central government headed by UPA, because these are the people who brought the Vedanta project to show India is developing, to convince Hardik that we are the economic growth में मजा आ गया. क्या mining हुई है, क्या bauxite निकाला है हमने. And Hardik be like, yeah, India is developing at a very rapid, India's economic growth is 8% per annum. लेकिन हार्दिक का घर तो impact हो नहीं रहा था उससे, तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. But they chose a way which was more effective. They filed a public interest litigation, and the justice was delivered in 2 years. So you can see that the primary location of action for pressure groups in India happens to be the party headquarters, by trading off the support कि सर इस बार आप हमें support कर दो और farm loan waiver कर दो, हम आपको support कर देंगे. So that's why before every election most of the government waive off the loan to get the support of the farmer union. so that they announce it from कि भाई हाँ इन्होंने बहुत अच्छा काम किया, सारे लोन माफ कर दिए, वापस खरीद लो ट्रैक्टर. So that is the difference. But another difference is that in America, in US, the interests that the pressure groups, the prominent interest groups are serving, they are non-traditional modern interests. So the most influential pressure groups that you see in US would be pro-climate change and foolish people. So you can see that they are lobbying the pressure groups like, so for example, for and against the abortion rights, these are the pressure groups. For and against LGBTQ community, there are pressure groups around gender rights. There are pressure groups around racial rights. That Black Lives Matter is a pressure group which we know that it does the activism in favor of African American community. In India, the most prominent pressure groups that we have, so for example, there you have modern cause and modern interests. What makes a cause or an interest modern is that it should not be on the basis of birth, so which means your ethnicity generally, and it should not be on the basis of class, because class is Marxian idea of the class-based society. So these are not modern in the sense that what we have now. In India, you have extremely traditional class-based, caste-based and ethnicity-based pressure groups. So either you will have farmers union, industrial labor union, you will have caste-based unions that we have seen. So that's what differentiates the developed world's pressure group ecosystem from Indian pressure group system. That their activism is for the modern cause. In India, you have the pre-modern identities because the society continues to be such. So you have either the class base. So zamindars would have their own pressure groups to protect their land rights. It was especially active during the land reforms. One of the reasons why land reforms could not be done effectively was because of the pressure groups of the zamindars. So the power of non-decision making कि land reform करना नहीं है, सीलिंग नहीं, सीलिंग का लॉ बना के आपने मैसेज दे दिया बस ठीक है, उसको इम्प्लीमेंट मत करने लग जाना, राइट? सो class interests, so you would have class interests means industrial workers, you would have capitalists, then you would have farmers and so on and so forth, and then on the basis of ethnicity you have most powerful caste groups in India, for example Karani Sena, the decider of freedom of speech, the limits of freedom of speech in our country. So these pressure groups act in those ways to protect the caste or class interests. Is it making sense to everyone? The last difference between a modern pressure group ecosystem in West and traditional ecosystem in India is that the outlook of the Western pressure group is transnational global. So if you vouch for gender rights, the reach of your pressure groups is across the globe. So Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders, Medicos Sans Frontier is active throughout the globe. But in India, because your interest itself is based on ethnicity, आपकी ethnicity तो territory के बाहर कहीं है ही नहीं, तो जो आपका reach और scope है वो भी it's bound by the territory of India. So if you are a caste based pressure group, how will you be correlatable outside the territory of India unless and until you are exactly Dalit pressure group? In that case you can establish a bridge with Black Lives Matter, but beyond that you can't. So you can see that the reach, most of the prominent pressure groups that we have in West, they are global in their outlook because the causes that they have chosen, like climate change, global warming, nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, racial discrimination. Racial discrimination is something that is present across the globe. The entire globe is threatened because of climate change. So once you are active in climate change and all these fields, you are relevant globally. Does that make sense to everyone? But if you want to protect the interests of your own caste, you will not be relevant even in the entire country, because the same jati is not present in the entire country. So it does not rings the bell. So it limits the scope of your cause locally. Is this clear to everyone? वानी तुम्हारे यस कहने का तरीका नो टाइप का है. Please be specific. Other people? Hardik, are you convinced about the economic growth and development? No, sir, I am not. Good. नहीं रहना चाहिए. तुम्हारे सिलेबस में लिखा हुआ है जीएस पेपर, जीएस मेंस के सबसे पहली लाइन है कॉन्फ्लिक्टिंग सोशियो इकोनॉमिक गोल्स. Your perspectives about conflicting socio-economic goals. Shivanshu, clear hai? Pressure groups? Okay, so I will give the PPT once everything is done. So go through these PPTs. I have whatever we have talked about is there. So let's start the discussion from here. Let's start with NGOs. I will not give per class PPT. So once this line of the syllabus, development industry and development process is done, I will send you the PPT. Then when we will do with the governance and role of civil servant democracy, then I'll send. So there would be two different set of notes that would be given. Does that make sense? Any doubt in general? Shivanshu?
Sir, when we're talking about civil society organizations, we do not talk about cooperatives. So,
Yeah, cooperatives. Yeah, no. So why we are not dealing with cooperatives is because cooperative is not written there in this line of the syllabus, number one. Why we are not doing cooperatives is also because now the cooperatives have been constitutionalized. So when we were dealing with Article 19(1)(c), we saw cooperative there. There is a whole new part after local governance for the cooperatives. The association between cooperative and state is so entrenched that they are like an extended arm of the state now, unlike NGO which maintain a safe distance, unlike pressure group which maintain the safe distance. But you are right. Cooperatives can in some cases be called as civic society action.
but you could say that they are part of the development industry, right?
They are part of development industry. Absolutely correct. Mayuk? Yeah.
NGOs, civil societies that act in India.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that these international pressure groups are not acting on behalf of their respective countries where they come from?
Yeah, correct. So what Mayuk is saying, that let's say there is an NGO which is working in India for primary education of tribals, and it is revealed that the NGO, the biggest donor or contributor of funds to that is the church located in Rome. So obviously there is a direct conflict of interest. There is no way they cannot be pursuing the conversion goal there in whichever schools that are run. Or for example, an NGO active in India receiving huge funds from Chinese government. The question is, it is civic society in India, but it is a state organ in China. Just because of the funding. So how can that kind of an arrangement be a purely civic society? So you are not a non-state actor, in fact you are a state actor. So one of the things that we'll do tomorrow is for example, act as both external state and non-state actors. And we'll take examples as to how they act as both state and non-state actors. So we understand them to be decoupled from the state. What if they are receiving money from some state, and especially those states that are hostile to India? तभी तो जब तुम ट्विटर पे डिस्कोर्स देखो तो सब ये प्रूफ करने में लगे रहते हैं कि ये पाकिस्तान से पैसा लेता है, पाकिस्तान से पैसा लेती है तू, वो उसको प्रूव करने का पर्पस क्या है? पर्पस ये है टू discredit the whole civic society activism. If it is revealed that even 1 rupee has flown from Pakistan or China, definitely should discredit you in India. तुम टेंशन में क्यों आ गए सुन के? ऑल ओके ना? कोई नया यूट्यूबर तो नहीं अरेस्ट हो रहा ना फरीदाबाद से? ओके, ठीक है. Any other doubt? Mohit?
Sir, can you please explain that point again? One where you told that why there are no ethnic-based civil societies in USA.
No. I did not say there are none. So the idea was not to communicate that the US is immune to the system of ethnicity based. They don't fall prey to this kind of thing. No, that was not the idea. The idea was to say, overall, in general, the tendency of the pressure group ecosystem in US is to pick up modern goals. And what defines their modernity is that their lack of association with ethnicity. But in India, more and more number of pressure groups are formed because of or on the basis of what? Yeah. Yes.
But sir, ऐसा क्यों है?
क्योंकि सोसाइटी ही वैसी है. तो जैसी सोसाइटी वैसी गवर्नमेंट, जैसी सोसाइटी वैसी सिविल सोसाइटी. तो जब सिविल सोसाइटी का ही तो हिस्सा है, तो हर चीज सोसाइटी का ही तो हिस्सा है. आप पूछो, ज्यादातर शादियां इंडिया में कास्ट की बेसिस पे हो रही हैं. यूएस में क्रॉस एथनिसिटी और रेस हो रहा है, या मान लो ऐसा कुछ नहीं है ट्रेंड. तो आप क्यों ऐसा? क्योंकि सोसाइटी ऐसे सोचती है कास्ट बेसिस पे. तो वो हर चीज में रिफ्लेक्ट होगा ना. फिर आप वोट भी कास्ट पे दोगे तो कास्ट बेस्ड वोटिंग भी होगी. फिर जब पॉलिटिकल पार्टी टिकट बांटेगी तो वो भी कास्ट बेस्ड होगा. तो हर चीज में वो रिफ्लेक्ट होगा ना. जब बिजनेसेस सेटअप होंगे तो वो बिजनेसेस में डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द कास्ट ऑफ द एम्प्लॉयर, वो इमीडिएटली एग्जिबिट हो जाएगा. आप किसी अनलेस एंड अनटिल यू आर अ लार्ज, वेरी लार्ज कॉर्पोरेट, barring very few exceptions, if you are a small business up to 50 to 100 people, you just analyze the employee caste and you can most likely pinpoint कि मालिक तो यही होगा इसी कास्ट का. So you can see that is the case in India. कुणाल, तुम्हारे लिए नहीं बोल रहा हूं, तुम लोग बाकी लोगों को हायर करते हो. Okay, any other doubt? So tomorrow we'll be way more faster. Because we was obviously the first class in governance has to be slow. Then we'll make a target of covering NGOs, self-help groups, donors, charities, and other institutions like World Bank and similarly other institutions, because that is what is there in your syllabus as well. So we'll cover that. So by tomorrow, I think we should be done with this line, and then on Monday we'll pick up the rest of the lines. Yeah? Okay. Chalo, take care. Bye bye. You have another class, Baswa sir, right? Yeah.